Okay, so first of all, I'm so sorry about the difficulties. This was obviously not planned. My name is Ala. I'm one of the coordinators for the San Diego EFA chapter, along with the wonderful Cody, who's sitting right next to me. So I'm here today with three fellow freelance editors to talk to you about editing basics for fiction. So we have quite a bit of material and we're already running late, so let's just jump right in. Did you move it to the next slide? Okay. So just to give you guys, this is going to be really annoying, but bear with us. So just to give you guys a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about, we'll be covering what editing really means, the editor-writer relationship, what to expect when you're working with an editor, how to prepare your manuscript for editing, how to work with an edited manuscript once you get it back from your editor. And we're also going to give you a brief overview of the publishing options available to you and the publishing process if you go the traditional route. And then we'll have a Q&A section at the end. So if you have any questions, please remember them or write them down so you don't forget. But we would appreciate it if you could hold them until the end, just because we have a lot to cover. So we want to keep up a good pace. Just collapse. Okay. So about the EFA, or the Editorial Freelancers Association, we are the largest and oldest professional organization of editorial freelancers in the US. Our website is displayed on the slide, but you can also access it. If you just Google Editorial Freelancers Association, it will be the first hit. And our website is technically geared mostly toward editors, but it also has some really good resources for authors. Some of them include the standard editorial rates, the member directory where you can search various editors given specific parameters. So you can search for editors who do a specific type of editing or work within a specific genre. There is also a job board where you can post a job and have editors apply for that job. And then we have editorial service definitions, which is kind of what we'll cover very briefly today, but you can take a look at the website as well to get more details about it. We have a client resources handbook, which is a wonderful resource. And then we also have events organized, most of which are, again, going to be geared towards editors, but there are also some events that are excellent for authors. The last time I logged into the website, some of the webinars that I noticed were how to work with an edited manuscript, how to work with feedback from your beta readers, things like that. So useful stuff for authors. So I'd highly recommend checking that out. Just a few words about each of us, just so you know who we are, what we do, and why we're qualified to talk to you about this. So as I already said, my name is Zala. My business name is the name of my business is Golden Horn Editing. I'm a freelance editor. I have a background in academic publishing, but I've also worked with traditional publishers, independent publishers, hybrid publishers, and I run a small nonprofit press for several years. I offer developmental editing, line editing, copy editing, and proofreading, so kind of a bit of everything. And I've worked on various types of manuscripts, but the manuscripts I enjoy most are fantasy, romance, and sci-fi. Cody, do you want to go next?
Hi, everyone. Like Zella said, I'm one of the co-coordinators of the San Diego chapter. I joined the EFA in late 2024, became a coordinator around late 2025. My goal here as a coordinator was just to bring writers and editors together. In a world where we're living a lot online and our work as writers and editors are predominantly online, I feel like this is the most value for you to be able to hear from us, for us to be able to hear from you. So that's why we're really happy to be here today. So thank you. As you can see, but you might not be able to. The areas of focus, so the manuscripts that I tend to edit are literary fiction, romance, mystery, thriller, contemporary, and I also work in nonfiction, mostly memoir and self-help. I have a background in journalism, so I've been an editor for several years now. I started as a journalism editor, and what I really enjoyed about working in journalism is that collaboration that you get with a writer, but it's such a fast-paced environment that when I made the switch over to publishing, I really enjoyed being able to interact with authors directly to get to the meat and potatoes of your manuscript. So that's a little bit about me. I think as we go through the presentation, we'll hear more about us, but that's the basics. My business name is Cody Rochelle Editing. Very boring. But I will also be the first one that comes up if you Google me, so that's helpful as well. To Leslie.
Hi, I'm Leslie Ferguson, and I've been working in publishing and editing for about a decade. Before that, I worked as a public high school English teacher for 2 decades, and I've also taught some college classes. I'm also a published author. This is my award-winning memoir. If you are a memoir reader, or even if you're not, but you want to check something new out, I recommend it. And the name is When I Was Her Daughter. And I'm really excited to join this presentation today and talk to you a little bit about editing. My background, like I said, is mostly in publishing for editing and editing students' papers. Have a lot of experience with that, to my students' dismay. My areas of specialization for editing are memoir, literary, women's fiction, poetry, and personal essays. And I have edited the gamut from fantasy to YA to historical fiction, and I've spoken as well. For my business, I primarily.
Everybody suddenly joined the Zoom session. Somebody
Do developmental editing and writing coaching, as well as line editing and copy editing. I will also do some proofreading if we're the right fit, but primarily the others are where I focus. What should I say about myself? That's it. That's all there is to know about me. So I'll hand it over to Dan. That's right.
Thanks, Leslie. My name is Dan Letchworth. My business name is Desert Owl Press. I've been a professional editor since 2008. Started at Scholastic, and I've since moved on from New York back to San Diego. I was the copy chief of San Diego Magazine for 7 years. My main clients all this time have been Scholastic, Mattel, and Little Brown. So my specialization is young adult, all the way from children's books, middle grade, young adult, into what I've now learned is called new adult, which is books for 18 to 25-year-olds. I primarily do copy editing and proofreading, copy editing / line editing, and I've recently been branching out into manuscript valuations / beta reading and book design. I've also self-published 4 of my own books, which I either wrote or edited and designed, and those are on DesertOwl.com. And I'm a recent joiner of the EFA.
Awesome.
So as you can see, a good range of expertise and genres and types of editing. So hopefully this will be useful for you. Okay, let's kick it off. What does editing actually mean?
Okay, so we're going to start with what does editing really mean, and I think the best way to help describe what something is to go over what it is not. So we're going to go over some common misconceptions that writers may or may not have about the editing process. The first one being, you guys can see this, but if not, it's fine. Let me know if you can't hear me. The first one is editing is just fixing spelling and grammar. I feel like that's often a conception that writers have, but editing encompasses so much more than that, much of which we will go over today. As you've heard us say already, if you're not already familiar, there are different types of editing, and the editing process is not just one step, it's many steps. So editing is way more than just spelling and grammar. It's a lot to do with plot, pacing, structure, a lot of things that are dealt with before you even get to the sentence by sentence manuscript itself. And then we have one editor does everything. That's another common misconception. It is very rarely the case where you actually, it's almost possible where you will give a manuscript to an editor, within a month they will do all the editing processes and you get it back, you got a clean manuscript.
That's the definition of a bad editor. You
yes.
don't want that.
We will go over red flags later. Just keep that in the back of your mind. That is one, because as we've already alluded to, there are very many steps in the editing process, and rarely are they done in one sitting. So that's one misconception. The next one is I only need editing if I'm self-publishing. I think we all know that's not true. You need it if you're self-publishing, yes, but even if you're traditionally publishing or you're going through a hybrid publisher, excuse me, and we will go over what a hybrid publisher is later. You're still going to have an editor, whether that's an in-house editor, an editor that is brought in to work on the manuscript. It's not just for self-publishing. Next one is I don't need an editor if I can self-edit or use AI tools. I think we all are familiar with Grammarly At this point, we all know what AI is. We've either worked with AI or we are familiar with AI. And while yes, tools like Grammarly are very helpful and they can help track down a errant comma or some basic grammar fixes, what you will find if you do too much of that is it might water down your voice. It might flatten your voice. The voice that you work so hard to get through to your manuscript and get through to your authors is often the thing that is first to go when you work with a tool extensively like Grammarly and definitely with AI tools. Not to mention that when you work with those tools, you're not getting a big bulk of what the editing process is, which is working during the developmental editing stage, pacing, character plot holes, structure, formatting, theme, all those things that are done by certain type of editor. Another thing that we will go in just a little bit.
Not to mention, if I can just jump in
Yes,
really
please.
quickly, if you use AI and it changes over a certain percentage of your manuscript, you can no longer copyright that manuscript. So it is no longer your original work. So just another thing to keep in mind.
That is a great point. Thank you.
There are 4 different types of editing: developmental structural, line, copy, and proofreading. Developmental structural editing is the first step and the foundation for you. The editor who's doing a developmental edit will handle the big picture issues. And they're identifying what's working and what's not. You should hire this kind of an editor fairly early on. Maybe when you're getting through the first draft and you have something to work with, and maybe you have some questions and you'd like a set of professional eyes to let you know what you're still missing, where the gaps are and what's working, so that you can revise and edit efficiently after that. And after a first draft, another great time to get that developmental editor in and begin working. You wait too long, you may be costing yourself more time and money because you'll be working backwards. So this is the most efficient way. There are some of the big picture issues your editor is looking for. They're looking for a great plot and story arc. What is the story about? Does it have a beginning and a middle and an end? Are there climaxes, obstacles, conflict, plot, all that good stuff? They're also looking for a focused narrative and a storyline. Does the story follow a unifying thread? Is it balanced? Is it well paced? Are there gaps and holes that need to be addressed? They're also looking for theme, symbolism, imagery, and some other literary devices that you might be trying to implement. And they're looking for, does the manuscript contain these layers? And are they appropriately developed? Or have you started a thread and then dropped it? Did you bring in a metaphor that then gets mixed with another metaphor that then gets dropped? They can help point those out and give you some ideas for how to shift gears. They're looking for your character arc, character journey. Does the manuscript, does the main character have something to do? Are they seeking something? Do they change over time? If they're flat, if they're passive, your editor hopefully will let you know that this character may not be helping readers turn pages. One of the important aspects of that is a believable psychology. Why does the character do what they're doing? Does it make sense that if event A happens, that then they react in way B? So editors are looking for your scenes. The scenes are where the page turning magic happens. Are they appropriately developed? Do you have a balance of what I call the inner world and the outer world? The inner world is everything that's happening inside your character. This is the story for the character and their heart and their mind and what they're dealing with, their dilemmas, their conflicts, how they respond to things and what they're dealing with. And often some of the strongest books have characters that are at odds with what's going on outside of them in the outer world, that there's a discrepancy or some kind of a conflict there between what's happening and what they want to happen. The inner world is, did I say the inner world already? I went out of order from my notes. And I should be able to figure it out. It's pretty self-explanatory. The outer world is everything that's going on outside of the character. This would be any choreography, which I describe is a good word for all of the movements, who the characters are, what they're doing, how the dance is in the world outside of the character. And dialogue, the setting, anything that you do, world building, all of this is outside of the character. The last thing that a developmental editor might be looking for is your writing. They may offer comments on patterns of writing errors they see. They may offer solutions, like if you are someone who is a fan of the dangling modifier, your editor might like to let you know that so you can fix those things. They may not fix them for you, but they'll say, hey, I've noticed you're doing this a lot, you know. You didn't hanging in your closet, you found your belt, no. Because
And if the developmental editor doesn't let you know, your copy editor for sure will.
My eye was twitching.
So here's a question I have, because developmental editing is the one area that I haven't done. How often does a developmental editor actually go in and make the edits themselves versus just commenting and saying, hey, you need to fix this?
This is for both of you.
I am an editor who has a hard time sticking to the job. In that, I want to do more, I want to give you more. You ask me to proofread and I see other stuff, it's really hard for me to not comment on the other stuff. And then that turns into not a proofread, so we might have to have a conversation. But as a developmental editor, or as a line editor, is that what you're asking, as a line editor or copy editor? No, as a developmental editor, if I see that there are a lot of problems, I like to point them out. I like to explain why they're a problem without laughing, like you're not hanging in your closet when you found your belt, because that's ridiculous. But then I will give examples perhaps for how they could restructure the sentence. And I might do that a couple of times because I'm a teaching editor. I really like to show the author what's possible. And then they can use it as their own or take it and run with it. And then they're learning, hopefully, to not make those same kinds of mistakes in the future, or at least to be more aware of them. So that's how I handle it.
Yeah, similarly, I think I would probably point out that this is a recurring pattern. I wouldn't necessarily go in and fix it while I'm doing a developmental edit, because the whole point of a developmental edit is that, you know, my advice might consist of this scene needs to be cut, or this scene needs to be rewritten, or you need to add a whole new scene. And so I don't see much point in going in and editing something that might not even make it into the final draft, because if I'm doing that, then I'm wasting your money and I'm wasting my time and nobody's benefiting. So I will point out the issue or the pattern in my editorial letter. I will point it out a couple of times in the text, maybe leave a comment and say, this is a problem because X, Y, and Z. But I won't necessarily go in and fix every single instance of it, because that's not what you hired me for. That's not what you're paying me for. So I'm going to be focusing on the things that you actually want me to focus on this round, on this class.
She has self-restraint there.
It doesn't always work out that way, but that's the
where
mindset
start,
I have
you know,
going
it's
in.
like, how can I best help this author? Because a lot of the authors that I work with are indie authors, and so they may not be able to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for round after round of editing. So if I can help teach them a little more along the way to save them that, that's what I'm all about. Even if it takes more out of me to do it, it's just how I roll. Okay, let's talk about line editing and copy editing a little bit more. These two types of editing deal with sentence level improvements and structure. Most editors prefer to work in Microsoft Word. Most, the ones that I've talked to, they aren't most, but I think that this is very typical. And they use track changes, which you may or may not be familiar with. Do plan to provide a Word doc or ask your editor how they want your manuscript so that they can edit and work best with you. Inline suggestions are for the text and the body of the manuscript for correction and movement. And comments in the margins are used to provide more information or to offer solutions and explain things a little bit better.
Or to ask questions. If
Or to
it's
ask
not clear what
questions.
you wanted to say with a certain question, with a certain sentence, your editor might leave a comment and say, like, it's not clear what you're trying to communicate here. Can we rephrase or something like that?
And if I can add to that, please don't answer those questions and tell your editor that you answered all the questions and they can go read the answers. The questions are for you to consider so that you know what you need to do. It's like, you know, I might or may not be dying to know the answer, but the purpose is for you to consider it because it was a flag that we noticed, something that we want you to pay attention to.
Sometimes it's you're commenting as if like this is me as the reader having a question as I go. It's like rhetorical.
Mhm.
I'm gonna find out the answer later, but I'm telling you what my thoughts are in this moment. Like,
Yeah.
why is this character doing this? Seems unusual and
Right. Yeah, because if you fix that problem, then we're not gonna have that question, and we'll find out later that everything was working smoothly, and that's the hope.
Also, another tip, if you do end up responding to an editor's comment, don't then resolve that thread, because if you resolve the thread, your editor is not gonna see the answer. So if you want them to see the answer, the thread needs to remain in the manuscript. I'm not a mind reader. I don't know that you left me a comment if I can't see it. So just leave it there, okay?
Sometimes authors will think that we've memorized our whole book. They're like, yeah, remember in that one chapter, in that one line where she does the thing, and I'm like, yes and no, like what answer helps you here?
I edited three books in this month. Like I don't recall the entire 95,000 words of your manuscript. Sorry.
And the last 2 points I want to make about line and copy editing for the process are your editor will adhere to a style guide. And the common one that we use often is the Chicago Manual of Style. And that's important because you'll know what they're using to base the decisions of their editing on. And if you can become more familiar with that as well, then you're working together under the same kind of set of rules, so to speak. And a line editor and copy editor should provide a style sheet, which has a lot of the words, terms, usage rules that were looked up, confirmed, changed for consistency. So then this style sheet can be the list of some of the details for your book that should be passed down to another editor. So that editor isn't starting over and wondering like, wait, how do we spell top secret? Wait, do we capitalize this? So you don't want that editor having to do everything that the first editor already did. This style sheet just helps everything be more efficient and helps everybody be on the same page.
It's
And
also wonderful if you're working in a series. Give that style sheet from the first book to the editor working on your second book, because the editor working on the first book already established, some guidelines or specific stylistic decisions that they took. And so this will be useful information for the editor working on your second book to know, and it will ensure that your language and your style is consistent across your entire series.
And please do ask your line editor or your copy editor for a style sheet. Don't assume that they're going to give one, because many don't, and it's part of the deal and it's really helpful. So don't be afraid to ask questions and to ask your editor to let you know exactly what they're going to be doing and what you're getting for your money.
it demonstrates that they were paying attention to those kinds of consistency issues too. Like when text is read aloud, is it italics and in quotes? Is it just in single quotes and double quotes? Or is written text in quote, that kind of
Yeah, there's tons of
same
examples.
same
of
treatment
things.
for the same.
Yeah, very important. So typically line editing, here's the big difference. Improves flow, tone, and style of prose at the sentence and paragraph level. While copy editing focuses more on technical accuracy, grammar, punctuation, spelling, and consistency. Doesn't mean that you won't get some of that with a line edit, but it usually means that you won't get any aspects of line editing and the creative aspect of it with copy editing. So those two types of editing are often interchangeable in the discussion of editing, and there are discrepancies about what it means to do a line edit versus a copy edit. So do ask your editor for them what falls under their scope for each type of edit, so you know what you're getting.
Sorry, we dropped the
Did
ball.
you drop the ball?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dropped the ball with the slides, I'm sorry.
This is just a
So you'll need a
really
copy
quick,
of this after.
really quick scan for you that gives a little bit of breakdown of bullet points of some of the differences between line editing and copy editing.
Question?
Yeah.
When you're approaching editors for copy editing and line editing, do you think it's okay to use one editor who can do both? Recognizing you need both? Like if you go to them and say, I want both, not like,
There are
You know what I
editors
mean?
who will do both. I think line editing and copy editing are the two types that you can do at once. So there are editors who will do both of those on the same pass. me being one of them. Because I find it difficult, kind of struggling with the same thing as Leslie pointed out before, except I don't struggle with it as much on the developmental level, but I do struggle with it. If I'm doing a copy edit, I will comment on line editing stuff as well and fix line editing stuff as well. So there are editors who do both in one path, there are editors who will only do one or the other. So just be clear about what the editor is going to do, what they can do, and what they're willing to do.
Yeah, I see a lot of people who say copy and line editing, and I'm like, is
Mhm.
that flat? Or that's good, okay, thank
There's a
you.
lot of overlap,
Yeah.
I always, I can't. If I'm working for a traditional publisher, I'm much more careful about line editing,
Mhm.
because I don't want to step on any toes. Working with an independent author, I let them know ahead of time, like, like, work it out, is this gonna be okay if I suggest, a less awkward phrasing here and there, word choice? And it's usually okay, because they do kind of go hand in hand.
And one of the points that I think is coming later, I don't think I've said it already, is that often if you get a really wonderful line edit and a line editor who is doing all of that, and your mechanics are kind of strong anyway, you may be able to forego another edit in the copy edit. And similarly, if you feel that your writing talent is like through the roof, you are creative, genius, you don't even have to be that good, but if you are very solid and confident in your writing skills and the creative aspect of it, of flow and language, and it's reading the way you want it to read, and it's not clunky, and you don't need any like writing help, then you may even skip the line edit. Line edits typically are more expensive. The copy edit may be everything that you need. So it's really important to understand where your manuscript is, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
I always say your manuscript doesn't need every single stage of the process every time. Maybe as you evolve in your writing career, you will get stronger, you'll understand, what keeps being presented in your developmental edits with your editor, but every manuscript should be copy edited. That's where you're getting the publishing standards, the grammar, the technical, all that stuff.
And proofread, so you don't have embarrassing typos in the end.
Yep.
And consistency.
Yeah.
Proofreading is the last step before publication. So once you're done, your manuscript is solid, it's been through rounds of editing, and it's done. Like, you could just literally publish it right this second. Don't do that, hire a proofreader.
Yes. That's the advice you can get.
Why do these stages happen in a specific order? Well, to help you craft your manuscript in layers from the macro big picture sense to the polishing and fine tuning sense, which allows you to improve the story and its various elements. Also, following this order saves time and money. Who's a fan of saving time and money? If you give your manuscript to a proofreader first, like, let's say you're like, I wrote this book, it's great, it's awesome, I love it, I need a proofreader, and it's not quite ready, you'll pay that proofreader to do surface level work, and they may not even tell you that there are bigger issues, because they're not looking for that. They're supposed to just fix those typos, and then you've got to work backwards. If you have your first reader or you publish it, then somebody reads it and they find all these problems, and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. That means you should have hired a developmental editor like a year ago. And now you got to maybe start over or scrap the whole project, which most authors hate to do.
And if I can add about proofreading specifically, if you intend to self-publish, we're going to get into the difference between the different publishing paths in a little bit. If you intend to self-publish, wait until the book is in its layouts, when it's been typeset into its print design, before you hire a proofreader, because a proofread can just mean I'm only looking for the smallest little details in the manuscript. In the traditional publishing world, and also if you hire one for self-publishing, proofreader is also looking for the elements on the page, like the headings, any graphical elements, how the end of line hyphenation is working, like make sure we don't hyphenate a word that's already hyphenated later on. That kind of like super duper fine detail. Is a line too tight? Is a line too wide? That's what a proofreader on a layout versus a manuscript will also find for you.
And many editors offer consultations to discuss your manuscript first and maybe take a look at some of your pages to help you decide what it needs. Like, if you're not sure, you're like, you know what? I've spent 5 years and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears on this manuscript. It's good to go. I just need a proofread so that, I don't spell my name on the front of the book or whatever. And then you give it to them for a proofread. You've already lost so much. But if you could say, hey, can we have an hour consultation, pay for their time, you'll get more than you bargained for that for sure. And let them see your manuscript so they can say, wow, I really think this would benefit from a line edit. There's some clunky phrasings here. Where are you with how beautiful you want the language to be? Is there a reason for having the clunkiness? Like, is your character a clunk? So they can help guide you and give you more to think about. So you are putting your time and your money in the right place. No. So just a little more on how to determine what kind of editing you need. So look at your manuscript, think about it objectively, if at all possible. And think about what work have you put into it. If you have not yet had one person who is a talented, trained editor read through it from beginning to end, you need a developmental editor. Most of the time, a more seasoned writer, like Cody was saying, you may be able to forego that because you're already looking for some of the things that might get missed by newer authors. If you have had your book developmentally edited, you know that all the structural elements, everything with character and story is working beautifully. It's tight, it's good to go. There are no holes or gaps that you should be aware of. That's good. Then reach out to a line editor or a copy editor for that sentence level book. Then once your book is completely done, like I said, it's perfect. You could just hit publish, get your proofreader.
Yep.
I think so.
Okay.
You need a second. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, we're gonna go on to the editor-writer relationship. This slide, first slide right here, is gonna be a little bit of what Leslie was just talking about, when to bring in an editor. We don't need to harp on this too much because I think you guys are aware now. Basically, eagle eye point of view, if you're not sure where to start, one of the best things that you can do is, and Dan alluded to this earlier, is maybe look to hire an editor who will do a manuscript evaluation. That's probably the most cost effective at the front end of things because it's not going to cost as much as a developmental edit, but they will go in, they will read your manuscript, they will give you a high level overview, usually the most affordable. And that's really if you genuinely are confused, you don't know where to start. If you're not familiar with the publishing process, and you don't know what your manuscript needs, that's a great first start. It's not a requirement, but it's a great first start if you feel like you need that. Yes.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, so just in case you're not sure what a manuscript evaluation is, it's similar to a developmental edit, but much less detailed. So an editor might go in and they won't leave any in-text comments usually. They won't give you chapter specific feedback. They won't give you like feedback on specific arcs or whatever, but they might go in. First of all, they will tell you like, I think this is ready for this stage of editing. And they might also give you like an editorial letter, which is gonna be like, I don't know, a page or 2 pages or whatever. They will usually tell you how long the letter is gonna be when you hire them. But they will give you just big picture feedback, but not nearly as detailed as your developmental editor would. Or they might just point out issues, but not provide solutions the way your developmental editor would. So just similar, but much less detailed and much more affordable usually.
That's a really good distinction. So thank you, Don. If you finish your draft, if you want to have beta readers come in, that's a great opportunity and great place for you to do that. That's when you can go on with developmental edit, everything that Leslie already went over. If your manuscript has already been developmentally edited, great, big picture solid, that's when you move on to this process. This is a little bit of a repeat, but I think we're good with that. Next one is how and where to find an editor. This is all a little subjective, but we have some resources for you. Obviously, the first we're going to mention is the EFA. If you go to our website, like Sala said in the very beginning, we have a member directory where you can search for editors based on the type of manuscripts that they edit, the type of editing that they do, the genres that they work in. You can also post your specific quote unquote job, your manuscript, and have an editor come to you. If you think of it like posting on, if you're familiar with Upwork or Fiverr or things like that, so if you're posting your project, some editors will come to you, they'll see that. So that's an option as well. That is something that's offered through the EFA for writers. And then ACES, which is our second option, the Society of Editing. That's another professional association, same kind of concept. There's a member directory. It's a great place for you to go searching for an editor that feels like the right fit for you. They'll usually have their email address and their website right there, so you can go poke around. It's just a great place for you to go hunting. You're hunting for the right editor for you. The next one is Reedsy. Is anybody familiar with Reedsy? I don't want to get, yeah, okay, I feel like most writers are familiar with Reedsy. Okay, so you all know about Reedsy. That's a great place to go looking. Same kind of concept. You go searching for an editor. Dan is Reedsy. There are a lot of editors that you will find will be on Reedsy. Yeah, just do that. So that's a great place. If you've never heard of Reedsy, go check it out. Same kind of concept. You can go searching for an editor. The only difference there is that it's like Upwork or Fiverr, those online marketing platforms where you're going to work directly through Reedsy the entire time. Communicate through Reedsy over email. Reedsy's basically housing your guys' communication and your work together. But you're still getting very, very, very high qualified editors. That's just a good place. The last one, simple, probably the best marketing that has ever existed is word of mouth. So just ask your writer friends if they've ever worked with an editor that they've got along with, great. It's a great place to start. A lot of editors, myself included. A lot of our clientele is built off of referrals. We work with a lot of editors who have said, oh, I worked with this editor and they really loved how things turned out. So that's a great place to start as well. Building a long-term working relationship. This is incredibly important if you plan on publishing independently, because you are, as an independent publisher, basically your own publishing house. That means that you've got to hire every editor that your manuscript needs. Again, that can vary depending on where you are in your author journey. But let's just say you're going through all of the editing processes, which I have a writer that I work with, and that is the case. She has a development editor, she has a line editor, she has a copy editor, she has a proofreader, and then I don't know this side too much, but I'm very sure she has a designer as well. She has her own quote unquote publishing house, just editors that she's worked with repeatedly over and over again. I am one of them. She reaches out to me at the beginning of the year. These are how many manuscripts I'm writing this year. Are you free? You want to build that type of long-term relationship with an editor if possible. One of the benefits of that is you get stronger work through consistency. If you work with the same editor time and time again, because you enjoy working with them, they're familiar with your isms, their voice, their pet phrases that they can call out. You know, the writer that I work with, I know her pet phrases. As soon as I get a manuscript, she knows her pet phrases, but they squeeze them every time through every manuscript. But we don't have to go through that extra communication step to call them out and go through that. We just know to catch them, bring them to her attention. That is the benefit of working with an editor. Not only that, but also as Leslie mentioned, the type of editing I do is copy editing. And in that phase, and that's not the only phase, but you get a style sheet. You get a style sheet through all the editing phases. But definitely in the copy editing phase, when they're close to the publication process, at that point, I'm keeping track of, does your character who had blue eyes in book 1 still have blue eyes in book 3? You know, their house is 2 stories. Are they just walking straight out of the bedroom out the front door? Those are details that as a copy editor, I'm keeping track of. And having worked on, let's just say, this manuscript with this author that I'm referring to, we're several books in. I know every single detail about every character, that this guy's got honey colored hair and a very raspy voice. If that all of a sudden changes in book 4, all I need to do is look at the style sheet. That is the benefit of working with the same editor over and over again. Yes, you can pass on your style sheet to various editors, but just imagine how much time you're saving on that editor already knows everything, because that is their style sheet that they're working. So that consistency is one of the best benefits.
I was also gonna say, if you do, and sometimes things happen and you have to change editors mid-series. You know, editors retire, they might not be able to take on your new project, whatever. But keep in mind that if you do end up switching editors, you might have to pay extra for them to read your previous books in your series. Some editors might be willing or able to do that for free, others might not. But if you're publishing a series, they do need to know what happened in books 1 through 3 so they can edit book 4. So just something to keep in mind.
It depends on where you are. I came in on book 2 one time and I just read book 1, you know, before the project. I feel like that's my duty as the editor to do that. But again, if we were in book 6, that might be a different story. So, but that's a very good point. And then one of the best ways to build a good relationship with an editor is to just, if you enjoy working with them, write a testimonial. You know, let them know that, you know, not only did you appreciate the work, but that you want to work with them again, because that saves us that step of reaching out however many months later, being like, I hope you're doing well. Just letting you know, I really enjoyed working with you. That's already been done. And then of course, that's if you enjoyed it with your editor. That's probably very, I don't know, common sense. But just wanted to put that out there as well.
We just like being praised.
Yeah,
That's all it
you know?
is.
But you know, it's a two-way street, because editors will rave about the projects that they have worked on with writers that they really enjoy, and writers or rave about the editors that they really enjoy working with. So this whole taught to people, we love books, so if we've edited a great book and it's been published, we're going to tell people about that. But if we didn't quite enjoy the author, that might be a different story. We'll get into that a bit more later too. So, yes, now.
Publishing and reading and writing, it always feels like a dying industry, so any just mutual help that readers and authors and editors give each other is appreciated. It all helps.
And that's the end of me, so we're going on to Dan. Oh, wait, sorry, we're going on to Zolan. I got.
Sorry, we switched topics
Sorry.
last minute, so.
This is all.
Okay, so just to give you guys a brief overview of what you can expect when you're working with an editor or when you're deciding who to hire. A few things to keep in mind. Your editor should always be willing to provide you with a sample edit. Some editors are willing to do that for free. Some editors will charge a small flat fee for that, for their time, but every editor should be willing to give you a sample edit. If they don't give you a sample edit, find another editor. The reason why sample edits are so important, and just to give you some context, so usually this will be, a sample edit will be somewhere between maybe like 1,000 to 3,000 words. But the reason why it's so important is because your editor will actually go into your manuscript, whatever excerpt you send them, and they will provide the feedback as if they were editing on your full manuscript. So you will get to see their approach, you will get to see how they communicate their feedback. You'll be able to see if the way they communicate their feedback is a good match for you. Some editors are more direct, some are, more encouraging or whatever. So you get to see if you basically vibe with them, right? Another reason why sample edits are important is because of what we kind of covered. You want to make sure that your editor is doing what you want them to do, like this in terms of like the scope of the work, right? Because even if you're using the right terminology, if you're both talking about a copy edit or a line edit, sometimes that still doesn't necessarily mean the same thing. I've worked with publishers before who hired me to do a developmental edit. And after I edited the full manuscript, it turned out that they were really looking for more of a line edit. And they were their definition of what developmental editing means was slightly different than what my definition was based on what I heard in the rest of the industry. So that would have been nice to know at the beginning of the project, not at the end, right? So even if you're working with an editor who has edited dozens of books, they've worked with so many authors, just get a sample edit because it will show you exactly what kind of edits and feedback you will be getting. So it's a lot more difficult to kind of have a miscommunication about what the scope of the work is if you can see it in practice.
I want to add to that though, regarding a developmental edit, sometimes it can be hard for an editor to provide that because a developmental editor is looking at the scope of the entire manuscript. Now, if you give them 5 pages, what are they going to say? Oh, if this person developed more, maybe you should develop him. And you're like, well, yeah, I got a whole book to develop him. And so it kind of sometimes seem like a waste of time. But I encourage you to reach out to that editor, talk to them about what they do and how they provide feedback. And I'm a real big fan of the Zoom consultation because I don't do so great just on email or text because I'm direct and that can come across wrong. I'm direct in person too, but I'm also this. And so it does hit differently. And you can get a feel for that person and if they're your cup of tea. And if they're not, thank them for their time. And no editor should be upset if it wasn't a good fit and you wanted to go find an editor who was the right fit. And that's what it's all about.
Don't be afraid to ask for a discovery call before or after the sample edit. Discovery call being exactly what Leslie just said.
And for some kinds of editing, like developmental editing or manuscript evaluation, if it would be possible to give a sample of that based on your work, some editors will have a sample ready from a different job. It's maybe, with details and names changed to protect that author's IP. But
or titles of books that they've edited. Check out this award-winning book and this award-winning book. You can see the work I did. That could be helpful.
That is, I don't think we have that covered anywhere in the presentation, but I just wanted to add to that. I know that one of the most common advice, pieces of advice that you can get about how to find an editor is, I don't think you mentioned that, but, I've heard that a lot, like being passed around author circles, like look in the acknowledgement section
Okay.
of your favorite books and then see which editors worked on that. Or look at the editor's website and see which books they have listed on their website. That's great, but also keep in mind that it's not always a reliable indication of what they did on that book, because maybe they formatted that book, right? They didn't necessarily work as a developmental editor or as a copy editor or as a proofreader. So if the book reads really well, that they might not have had anything to do with that, right? So it's a great indication, but if you're hiring someone based on the books they have listed on their website, maybe ask them what it was, like what they actually
Yeah.
did for that book. Just so you know that you're not, like, you're hiring someone who's actually done copy editing before, not someone who's just who's just formatted or typeset like dozens of books and just has all of these books listed on their website and they've never actually worked with a manuscript on a copy editing level before. So
And to add to that, I think an important point is, just because you were an editor on a project, it doesn't mean that you had the final say. And that
Mhm.
someone didn't come along after you and mess stuff up, or make other choices that you didn't make, and now you're getting charged with that decision. So it is good to have the conversation.
or, sometimes we can flag all of these issues or inconsistencies and the author makes a conscious decision to disregard that feedback because X, Y, and Z, right? Maybe they have a good reason for it. That doesn't mean that the editor didn't catch it, but there might have been a conversation about this and the author decided to proceed with that error, like knowing that it was an error, but it was their stylistic choice or, there was a reason for it. So if you see an error in a manuscript, wasn't necessarily an oversight, it could have been a conscious decision.
Artistic choice.
Yeah. Artistic choice.
I'm guilty of them too.
Okay, so kind of talked about this already, so I'm gonna skip over the next point, but another thing you wanna look for in an editor is you want them to draw up a contract for you. Some editors, I know that they work without contracts. I prefer to work with one. I think it protects both the author as well as the editor. The contract should always state the scope of work, exactly what your editor is going to do, exactly what they're not gonna do. It should provide timelines, due dates, fees, when you're expected to pay, which portion of the fee, things like that. And it also has clauses in there that you're not going to need 99% of the time, but that are really crucial to have in place for that 1% of the time when something goes wrong, right? Your editor might not be able to deliver their feedback on time, or you might not be able to provide them with the final draft of the manuscript for them to edit on time. And you need to have provisions in place for what happens when when those situations occur. Just so you already have everything set up. Some editors might expect the author to pay a deposit once the contract is signed. This really, really varies from editor to editor. In my experience, this is more common with editors who are full-time freelancers because, for example, if you book an editor to work on your manuscript for 3 weeks in May, for example, that means that they're setting aside 3 weeks of their time for your project. And so if 2 days before they're supposed to start working on your manuscript, you decide that actually you're not quite ready for an editor, they now have no work lined up for those 3 weeks. And so they might ask you to pay a small deposit once the contract is signed, just to kind of safeguard against that. The amount will vary widely. I know of editors who ask for 50% of the fee non-refundable when this contract is signed. I know of editors who ask for $50 when the contract is signed. It's really like, it depends on the editor. And this is another thing that should be spelled out in the contract. So you know exactly how much you're supposed to be paying and when you're supposed to be paying it and whether or not you're entitled to get that money back if something goes wrong. Try to provide your manuscript by the agreed upon date at all possible. Because again, your editor might have other projects lined up after your project, so if you miss the deadline especially if you miss it considerably, your editor might not be able to come back to your manuscript for weeks or even months after they were supposed to work on it because they might not have another opening in their schedule.
And importantly, the entire manuscript. I literally have one coming up where the guy says, I can give you the first 150,000 words. I'm still working on the last 30,000. I'm like, I need the whole thing at once because I'm not just reading one page at a time. I'm searching through the whole thing to make sure that these things are consistent. So have it ready when it's ready.
Yeah. And then one last thing, your editor might ask you to share your goals for publishing. Whether or not you're trying to pursue traditional publication, if you want to self-publish, if you want to go through a hybrid publisher, and again, we'll go through all of that in a little bit. And that doesn't mean that you will be getting a different quality service if you decide to self-publish versus if you're trying to pursue traditional publication. It just means that each of these publishing paths has different expectations, and different things that the editor will be keeping in mind as they're working on your book. So it's just useful context for us to have. In terms of red flags, as we already said, if your editor doesn't want to do sample edit, find another editor. If they don't want to do a contract, if they don't want to drop a contract, that's really up to you. It really depends on how comfortable you are working with, no contract. I probably wouldn't feel comfortable without that safety blanket, but it depends on, you and your personal preferences. If you see unusually low rates or really fast turnaround times, that is a massive red flag. I've seen listings where an editor was promising to do a full developmental edit of a 95,000 word document in like 4 days and provide a 25-page editorial letter for $100. So
It's called ChatGPT.
well, exactly, like, will you be getting that editorial letter? Yeah, but it won't be written by a human. So, at that point, if you want to go that route, just feed it into chat yourself. Like, it saves you $200. Don't do that. That's a terrible thing to do. But and then as we already discussed, like if you're with copy editing and line editing being the one notable exception, if your editor claims to do all editing stages at once, go with another editor. They might, but note that like they might be willing to do all the different stages in different passes. So they might do one round for developmental, it goes back to you, you incorporate the feedback, you send it back to the editor, they do line editing or copy editing, goes back to the author, you do your stuff, comes back to me, I do the proofread. Those are 3 different stages. I'm focusing on a different thing like during each stage. That's okay. Just don't do everything at once.
And there are different ideas about that. I just want to chime in. If I've worked with someone for a developmental and a line or copy edit, I will not do their proofread. The main reason being, I've seen their book too much. I'm more likely to miss those little things, just like they did, because they've seen it a million times, because our brains fill in the information that's not there with what we know it should be. So I always recommend, like if I've been your line editor, move on for the proofreading so you can get a fresh set of eyes. So consider what you.
And I recommend it. If I'm a copy editor, I wouldn't proofread anybody's manuscript. It's up to subjection, but yeah, I'm not gonna touch it because I've been looking at this for a month, so.
So on the flip side, things that editors will watch out for, similar things. If the writer wants the editor to do everything at once, red flag. If they don't want to sign a contract, I wouldn't feel comfortable working with that client. Some editors might be willing to, so it really depends on the editor. If the author refuses all feedback, this usually comes into play after I do a sample edit. I will do a discovery call with the author. We will talk over the feedback I gave them. And if they're pushing back against every single piece of feedback that I gave them, that's a red flag. That does not mean that you're not allowed or even encouraged to push back against certain things. If I identify an issue and I give you a suggested solution for that issue, and that solution doesn't work for you for whatever reason, please feel free to come up with your own, or to ask me to brainstorm with you for other solutions. That's perfectly okay. And I want you to do that if it doesn't feel true, what I suggested doesn't feel true for your manuscript for whatever reason. The important part is to recognize that if I'm flagging something, that means there's an issue. So don't just ignore that. You can ignore my suggestion, but recognize that there's a problem and that something needs to be done about that, right?
Likely everything we flag is something the reader will notice.
Yeah. And then unrealistic deadlines, we already talked about that, so I'm just gonna skip over this. A few words about the cost of editing. Most editors will use one of the following pricing models. They might charge per word, per hour, per page, or they will charge a flat project fee, in which case they're probably actually charging you per word or per hour, but they're packaging it up with extra fees and, taking into account the admin time and whatever as well. The cost may vary widely depending on how long your manuscript is, what the genre is. Obviously, like things like academic writing or scientific publications or things like that are gonna be much more expensive to edit because they require a level of expertise that not every editor has. So those are gonna be more expensive. The level of editing, developmental is usually the most expensive, then we go to line editing, then copy editing, and then proofreading is usually on the cheaper end. How much experience your editor has. Editors with more experience, highly qualified editors will obviously charge more for their time, while someone who's just starting out might charge less. The complexity of the text, if I'm working on an epic fantasy with multiple POVs, points of view, with multiple timelines, with complex political schemes, with loads of world building and loads of, made up terms and everything, that's probably gonna be more expensive than if I'm working on a small town romance, right? It's a different kind of beast. So just something to keep in mind. It's really difficult to give you guys specific numbers. But there is a way for you to check if what your editor is quoting you is a reasonable rate or if they're trying to take advantage of you. We already mentioned that the EFA website is a wonderful resource. So one of the reasons why is because there's this nifty calculator on our website where you can go in, and I have a photo of it on the presentation, but go check out our website. There's basically you can select the type of editing you want, so developmental, line, copy, proofreading, the genre that you want. You can insert your specific manuscript length, word count. And then there's also a couple of additional settings that you can play around with, whether or not your editor has more experience, less experience, if they've had additional professional training, things like that. And it will give you the total project fee on the low end, the median, and on the high end. So it kind of gives you a sense of, is this reasonable or is this like way too much or way too little, right? So it just gives you a ballpark. And that is it. So I think now we're passing on to Dan, if I'm correct.
Yeah,
How to prepare your manuscript for editing.
so you've got a manuscript. It's finished. Congratulations. You finished your first draft, you typed the final word. It's ready to go to an editor right away, right? Good question. No, it's not. And I'm preface this by saying that I've written 3 books, so I also acknowledge that your first draft is going to be bad. No matter who you are, no matter how many books you've published, no matter how much experience you have, your first draft is going to be bad and you have to revise. That's the first step before anybody else sees it. The main reason that it takes usually so long to write a book, you're going page by page, word by word, you're at this pace, and that's going to be most of the time way slower than it takes someone to read the book. So my advice for the first thing you do before anybody else sees your manuscript is print the whole thing out and take a step back and read it as if you've never seen it before. Put yourself in the mind of a completely unfamiliar reader who's just been handed this book from scratch and try to be as objective as you can about it. And the reason I say print it out is so you're not tempted to fix things as you go. Like, you can scribble yourself some notes to come back later, but you really want to, after spending months or years finishing your masterpiece, and focusing on all the small details, you want to see the big picture. Stephen King really put it well in On Writing, his book On Writing. He says, your first draft, you write with the door closed, because that's when you're just in your own world, you've got all the great ideas going, and you're just getting them all on the paper as fast as you can. Don't even worry about getting exactly right. The important thing is to get the words on the paper. Then the second draft, you write with the door open. That's when you start thinking, okay, it's not just me, it's somebody else who has no reason to care about this book from the outset. What are they going to notice about it? Look at the big picture stuff. Identify the themes that pop up that maybe you weren't aware of as you were writing. Oh, this connects to here. Maybe I can massage that more into a stronger connection on my second pass. But like I said, and I don't think anyone is a genius enough to just go straight from their first draft to submissions. Yeah.
Some people do, but we don't recommend it.
Yeah. Revise, just assume that you're going to have to go through multiple drafts. Then, with that door open, to get your second draft, maybe you've already gone through it on print. Get some beta readers. Maybe hire a professional from EFA or from your marketplace of choice, or look to your left and right. You know some fellow writers who I assume also love reading. And if you are good friends and they are very generous, maybe they'll do it for free.
But hopefully they're reading in your genre. If they don't read books in your genre, do away, you know, they can't help you.
Yeah. And the most important thing at that stage, at the beta reading stage, is you want honest, constructive feedback. If it's just praise, it's gonna feel good, but it's not ultimately gonna help your
It's not real, you know?
And if
People don't want to hurt your feelings because they're your friends.
And what I always remind myself is George Saunders, my favorite writer, said, "If you're gonna make it as a writer, you have to have an ego like a tank." Like you have to be able to take it if someone's gonna say, "This doesn't work. I have no idea what was happening in this scene." Of course, it's gonna hurt because it's your baby. It's what you've been working on this whole time, but you have to take that because that's what a reader is gonna notice. And that varies. Like if you are lucky enough or wealthy enough to get multiple beta readers and they have wildly different feedback on the book, that's less helpful. Like if one person absolutely loves a scene, one person hates it, it's probably fine. But if both people are like, that's when you go, well, maybe I need to make some changes here. Yeah, you need constructive feedback and allow for big changes at that point. Beta reading, even at the developmental editing stage, leave room, like assume that you might need to toss an entire chapter and rework the storyline because that's going to be your last chance to do it. You don't want your copy editor saying, "What happened to this character who was in chapter 1? They just disappeared." Because at that point, you've spent a lot of money that you had to redo because you're going to rewrite a bunch of stuff. Yeah, it's all worth it. You gotta get the big to small, right? Beta reading, developmental editing, you're getting closer and closer to the final product. Read your manuscript aloud. That is one weird trick that I recommend. Because you know when you're reading, you have that interior reading voice. Maybe, maybe not. But when I read, I can hear the words as I go. And if there's like an unintentional rhyme, it throws me off. If there's a whole bunch of sibilants in the sentence, a bunch of S sounds, it's like, that's not fun. You want the language to be elegant, to flow. And the best way to catch that stuff is to read your own stuff out loud and go, okay, I stumbled over that part. The sentence is too long. Or I promise you will catch a lot more that way. Just read it aloud. And yeah, my last tip on how to prepare your manuscripts before as an editor is to use AI cautiously. I'm not going to blanket say don't use it because it's just a fact of life, right? When we use it. But you can't just hand your book over to a computer and expect it to fix it and go, well, that's it. Horror story, I was telling them about it earlier. I did a manuscript evaluation this year, and the author was up front. He said, I did use AI to help me stitch a couple scenes together. It's like, I thank you for letting me know. I appreciate the disclosure. That's all I need. But he clearly didn't then read back over the results of what the AI did before he sent it in, because the same character was introduced twice in the same scene, doing the same thing, described the same way, but with like sentences kind of mixed around. I'm like, no human would have written this. Not to be, okay, disclaimer, but maybe that's not as big was. Maybe if he would have written that and just forgot. I don't know, but he did say that he used AI. And then when I brought this to him, I didn't want to assume that this was AI glitch. And I said, is this one of the places where it was AI? And he said, oh, geez, yes, it was. I'm sorry. I'm super embarrassed. And it's like, okay, no problem. I'll make note of that, and I'll highlight where these repetitions happen and move on. AI can help. It helps best in a limited, defined scope to solve specific problems. But ultimately, probably don't have to say this to you guys because I feel like you probably know. It's no substitute for a human who loves reading and has been reading their whole life and has their own specific perspective.
Okay, how to work with an edited manuscript.
Folks, I'm gonna flag you down. We have about 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we're sort of, I apologize for the late start.
Okay. Yeah. Here are some tips for managing feedback. How do you navigate that when your editor's given you your manuscript, you open it, and it looks like a massacre? Getting your edited manuscript back can feel like an assault. It's normal. It's supposed to. That means your editor put a lot of time into this, flagged a lot of things for you to consider. You're getting your money's worth. It can be especially hard for newer writers who aren't used to getting a lot of constructive criticism about their work. So take lots of deep breaths when you get that report, you get that manuscript, get ready, prepare yourself to be guided and completely overwhelmed. It's okay. Don't make any changes right away. Wait until you have a revision game plan. Your editor is a trained expert and they're seeing things you could not see. Chances are, if you're paying money to be edited for a good editor, you want to know what they have to say because you want to write the best manuscript you can write, and your editor wants you to be successful in that. Try to remember that at all costs. Your editor is not out to get you. Your editor does not think your book sucks. Your editor sees some problems that you knew were probably there. You just wanted that professional vote of confidence. Yes, here are the problems. Now you can move forward with your life.
We're here to help.
Yeah, we're here to help. Review the feedback in manageable chunks. And remember, feedback is not a demand. You do not have to do something with it. It's information for you then to consider to be better informed for how you want to move forward. Take some more deep breaths, take a walk, get a snack. But this will take time to process, not a quick fix. Above all else, do not give up, people. So don't accept or reject those changes immediately. It's important to review your editor's report, their summary, read all the margin comments first, get a sense of the scope of the feedback, and get some snacks. It's not uncommon for a developmental edit to come back with some inline feedback. And it's not uncommon for a line edit to come back with some comments in the margins. So work from the big picture elements down. Consider all the comments, all the info. You might have to read it a couple times, go through it, consider what the editor is trying to tell you. Then take some notes and come up with a game plan for resolving the edits. What do you agree needs to change? How will you rework it? Do this all separately, not in the manuscript. Then consider what you're going to do and how those changes will improve the manuscript. Then make all the structural changes first. Don't start rejecting and editing line edits. It's a waste of your time. What if you end up cutting a whole section? It had a bunch of inline suggestions for grammar issues. Now you don't need it. Great, you cut it. Anything you cut or move, put it in a safe place. You might need it again. You might want to refer to it. You might be like, oh crap, I deleted that, but I was supposed to delete this. Where did it go? Keep a running log of everything you cut so that it's not gone forever. Once the manuscript is where you want it developmentally, everything is solid and sound, then go through and resolve those line edits. Briefly, here's the difference between comments and corrections in your manuscript. Again, I said this before, but briefly, the comments will be in the margin at the right when you have track changes on. All of the stuff, all the massacre that you see in the text is the inline suggestions. These are corrections. So editors will use the comments for explanations. Maybe they're suggesting something. They want to point out issues. They'll provide examples of language fixes. They'll offer solutions for improving the story. These are just some examples of what you might see in that section. In the corrections, they're looking to fix errors. They're omitting redundancies. They might move content, but they should do it all in track changes. Nothing is their decision. You get to see it and decide. I recommend looking at your manuscript with no markup mode on. That way you can see it without the massacre. You might read a couple paragraphs and be like, well, damn, my editor did a great job. This is looking great. I do want to accept all these changes. It gives you a chance to see it without the mess. It removes the clutter so that you can think clearly. So I also have a picture here of the track changes toolbar for you. All these arrows are pointing to the icons that you'll be using. If you need a tutorial on track changes, you can Google it. There's tons of information, but your editor will expect you to be working with that. And you might even be able to ask them a few questions if you're not sure. So good luck.
For the sake of time, Dan, how do we feel about publishing overview steps?
We can skip I was gonna talk about the differences between traditional publishing, hybrid publishing, and self-publishing. But it's mostly on the slide, so
Yeah.
if we share the presentation.
We're
with
gonna
you
be
guys-
sharing the presentation with everybody. I think everybody's familiar with traditional publishing and independent publishing. It might be hybrid publishing that some people have not heard of, so all that information will be on the slide as well. Is that okay, Dan?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
We also have some steps about the traditional publishing process
Yeah,
listed in the presentation, so,
I feel like if I could just
Yeah. Anything that
Just
you deem
bring
really
the most important points. Some of the most important points I could think of. Don't expect to get rich. Maybe this is not news. If you get a traditional publishing deal, you'll get an advance, which is, it's a whole bunch of money all up front. Most books don't make back their advance. Publishers usually rely on their big tentpole titles, the, the big names to make most of their money. If you're lucky, you'll get royalties, but most books don't. And in a traditional publisher, you are technically signing away the rights to your work. So you may not have the final say on how your edits work out, but
or even on things like the cover. Like if you're working with a traditional publisher, you might not have a lot of say when they design the cover and what it looks like, and
unless you've been around for a very, very
yeah.
But ideally, they will listen to you and they will take your wishes into consideration, especially if they want to maintain a good relationship with you and buy your next book. The other end of the scale, self-publishing, you got to do it all yourself. You got to hire all the people yourself, all the professionals, but you retain all the creative control.
Then a hybrid is the next in between.
Hybrid is in between.
I think we had a wrap up and takeaway, y'all, but I'm pretty sure we feel comfortable. I think we've beat it to
Covered
death,
everything.
the editing process. So we're going to go ahead and just, this will be on the slides that you receive, our contact information. Again, we're book lovers just like you. So if you have any questions at all, even if it is, a step before the manuscript evaluation and you just want to pick our brains, email us, check out our websites, reach out.
And like we said, I think several of us, if not all of us, offer free discovery calls, so feel free to get in touch and let us know, and we can meet with you and, just chat about your book or where you're at or what your next step is, or, whatever else that you're curious about.
And if we have business cards, if you guys need them, want them. I have a sign up sheet right up front. If you're interested in the sample edit, my contact information is there as well.
We both.
Leslie has her business card, Dan has his. And that's pretty much all we have for you. We are nerds, so we could talk about this forever, but we really appreciate you guys listening, and hopefully you got something new from this, because everything that we know like the back of our hands, is a completely different side of the spectrum that you are working with, which is the creative side of things. What really matters. We can't do anything until you write your story. So hopefully we're able to impart some wisdom. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for having us. I don't know if we have time for Q&A. I'm gonna leave that up to you.
Yeah.
I think we can spend some time.
You wander on
Yeah.
the Zoom
Oh, okay,
and
yeah,
see if there's questions in the Zoom.
okay. So,
There were
yeah,
questions on-
you guys are seeing, so if there's
Yeah.
hands up for now, why don't you call on
I did
people?
see one.
I noticed earlier, you mentioned that you tend to refer to the Chicago Manual of Style. Is that just for nonfiction academic works, or?
No, that is, you will see that sometimes in academic works, but it's sometimes APA style as well. But definitely fiction predominantly. what rules is the Chicago Manual of Style. Now, traditional publishers tend to have their own style guide, so they're working with Chicago Manual of Style as like the base, but sometimes they will implement their own preferences. And that it goes for indie authors as well. We will be working with Chicago Manual of Style because that is the publishing standard. But over time, especially if we're working with a series of yours, you will start to develop things that you prefer. You want, when text messages, you want them to be in italics or you want them to be in quotation marks. That's very nuanced things, but that becomes your style guide as an author. And those are preferences that you can share with us. But to answer your question, it's not just nonfiction, it also predominantly fiction as well.
After the massacre, what?
I love that beginning.
Is there like a standard or kind of like a ballpark turnaround time from where you receive it to where an editor will get back?
It usually depends on the editor and on you. Like that's something that's gonna be between you and the editor. It depends on how much time you have. It depends on, multiple factors. I've worked with authors before who were kind of workshopping with several different editors, and the reason why they decided to go with me is because I told them there's no set turnaround time for you. If you need a month, you take a month, and if you need 2 weeks, you take 2 weeks. And the author said that the reason why she didn't go with another editor is because that editor told her, like, you need to turn this around in 2 weeks, and that terrified her. So I told her, I don't have a set schedule. I knew that I would be able to take on another project. Which honestly isn't great for my project management, and I've shot myself in the foot so many times with this approach, but it really depends on the editor. So just ask them and they'll be able to give you that answer.
To add to that, you might not want there to be too much time because your editor's working on other books and you want your book to be as fresh in their minds as possible when they get it back so that they can move you to the next level more efficiently.
Some editors will also, when working with indie authors, provide more than one round. So a round is when I've worked on the manuscript from top to bottom. We call them passes. We'll read your manuscript 2 or 3 times, and that is one round. Give it back to you, review it, implement any changes that you want. And I offer 2 rounds. So after you review it, you give it back to me, then I go around for round 2, read it several times, fix everything up. That whole process can take a month and a half. It could take a month, it could take 2 months. It really depends on the length of the book. So every editor is going to be different. And in those cases, I do have some strict turnaround times, but that's just because of what we're doing. That's taking up 2 months of both of our time. But again, the difference, I would do that with every project.
You were describing when you get to the end of writing your first draft, probably the first editing phase would be developmental.
Yes.
I'm writing hard sci-fi that's very technical, so I started with a plot outline. And I would have loved to have developmental editing on the plot outline, because the earlier you change problems, the less expensive it is further down. At least with software, it works that way. But do you guys do that on a plot outline?
Why not?
Speak to that. Well,
So what they call it alpha readers. If beta readers read a finished draft, if you're not finished with the first draft yet, and you just need some feedback on, here's a couple of chapters and an outline for the rest, why not ask an editor for an alpha reading?
you can definitely ask, and I think each editor is going to have their own
Okay.
approach. My thought is an outline doesn't provide enough for the editor to get an idea of the story, to see what's working and what's not. They might be able to identify some things immediately, like, where's the climax? There's there's nothing, where's the middle of your story? But as far as the outline is working on a creative and technical and story level, everything, it's really hard to tell.
And my themes were color coded going through the outline.
See, that's nice too, and it depends on how, I mean, that's great, but they can't tell you whether or not the themes are working.
True. That's
So
right, because there's not enough cuts.
They may be able to identify some things that are missing, or some things that they're excited about, like, wow,
Okay.
this is gonna be cool. But I feel like it's not enough, and I was just working on an outline with someone, I've done her developmental edit, and I provided a proposed reorganization for her, and she worked with it and wanted me to review it. And all I can do really is be like, yeah, this sounds good, this sounds like what we thought, yeah, okay. Well, don't forget, you may wanna write about this when you do this section, maybe move this here. And then she was asking questions when we had our debriefing about it, and I'm like, well, it just depends. I'm gonna have to see it when you write it. I can't tell you
Okay.
the balance is good. I can't tell you if it's working yet.
It's also, if you have a structure and you say this scene, you know, this happens in the scene, this is why this is important, this is what I want readers to take away from that scene. That's great, and that might be working well in the outline,
Yeah.
but it doesn't necessarily translate into your text. So
Right, okay,
we can't tell if your intentions came through the way you wanted them to come through if we don't read the text.
got it.
So
So we can say, yes, you filled out the outline, good job, but we don't know yet if it's.
Gold star.
Yeah, let's start.
Yeah. So I came up in fiction writing workshops myself, and it was pretty routine that in addition to short stories that are complete as is, we would get the first couple chapters of a novel. If we work with the same class a couple quarters in a row, we might see more chapters as we go. So it was pretty common to go, okay, here's what's working and what's not in this chapter. Here's our expectation for what might come next. So I think there's room for it. You just have to keep in mind that we can only give you so much feedback. Here's what's working so far. Here's what I might expect to happen. And if we see the outline, we go, oh, I see that how that might pay off. But best way to tell will be to see at least a rough draft.
You're looking at the part of the iceberg that's above the water,
Yeah.
but the
That's
the
right.
novel itself is invisible. Okay,
We can help steer the ship away from the iceberg early enough. If iceberg is different.
right, okay, yeah, right. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions online or in person?
Yes.
When I'm going back to style sheets,
Mhm.
go way back. So I write science fiction and fantasy.
Mhm.
So as a writer, when I'm getting ready to send this to an editor, how much of my own like style sheet should I set aside and be like,
Please send it.
Please send it. Then
once, because I mean, you build your world
well,
and you have so much you can say. You're like, no, I
know
want to
that
send
is
you.
impressive.
Not more than the novel
yeah,
itself.
I said whatever you're comfortable with, because sometimes your inner scribblings can be very personal, you know, even though they relate to the story. So before I start a manuscript, I reach out several days before and I say, you know, we're getting ready for our project. Here's what you're gonna send me, and I say, please send me anything that you have that you're comfortable with, timeline, characters, outline, world building, anything that you want, because that'll help immensely. So, yeah.
We were actually, that's the word count.
No. I know, because it's gonna help me. I mean, it's a good question.
Hopefully.
Leslie, should I be adding that to the work now?
You might consider it.
No,
Might be under
just so you know, I don't.
And if you have that timeline, I might not read ahead because I want to also be able to give you some feedback on, as I talk about often, my reactions on my expectations as I go. But it'll help save time if I notice a recurring issue, if I can look ahead and go, oh wait, does this resolve? Okay, it does.
No, a good question.
Also, another thing that we were actually just talking about before this presentation is, if you have specifically, this is relevant for fantasy and sci-fi, for example, if you have made up terms, if you have, you know, like an entire history or whatever, and there are important dates that we need to keep in mind or things like that, that is useful information for us to have, because your editor might not know if you're very inconsistent in the way you spell an original term that you came up with, the editor doesn't know which is the correct way to spell it, right? And so,
If high priestess is capitalized.
Yeah.
But what it's everywhere else, you know, we,
So,
I guess. with
like,
your preferences.
it depends on the editor, but I've talked with editors before who are very brutal in their approach, and so their philosophy is basically, if you don't send me information about how you want to spell these things, I will assume that the first instance, like however it's spelled in the first instance when I encounter it, is the correct way, and I will just change the rest of the manuscript to match that first instance. So it might save the editor and you both a lot of time if you have any specific preferences, if you let them know ahead of time.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I'm just gonna throw out, thank you so much, because writers are not, they're very facile with words, like when they're writing, but they're not always well spoken out loud, and you four have been incredibly giving and eloquent, so thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for asking questions, just, we could talk about this all day long, so.
Please take business cards, stay in touch, we'd be happy to help.
Cody already mentioned this, but we also have sign up sheets for, pre-sample edits, and for, a kind of like raffle. If you sign up for our newsletter, you can get a free, I think it's a 5,000 word copy edit. I think that's what we did. So that's outside. If you want to check it out, it's all there. And if you have any other questions, either now or if you think of anything later on, please feel free to let us know.
Thank you so much. I did like first email to you guys to tonight. You guys have been amazing. Thank you so much for driving all the way from the meeting.
Of course.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you. This
Thank
was
you to
amazing.
these two for
Sorry for
organizing,
the
and getting it
tech.
going.
Oh, yeah, fine. We figured it out.
Thank you.
We already shared the presentation, so you have access to that. So, if you want to download that and just, send it to everyone, I'm assuming you have everyone's contacts.
Yes.
So, feel free to just share that and, those people can take a look. After the fact. We had such a pretty presentation.
You'll see it, you'll see it. And we're gonna be around, we're not, running out the door immediately, so if you wanna ask us any questions,
Yeah.
we're here, so. But thank you again, thank you so much, appreciate it.